Greetings, fellow cultivators. Welcome to Autonova. Remember to like and subscribe to support the journey. Now, let's dive into the next chapter of A Will Eternal. The fourth level of the Undying Codex, the Undying Bones, had a secret magic known as the Undying Emperor's Fist, and this was Bai Xiaochun's first time using it. As he did, his aura, his flesh and blood, and even his soul and life force, seemed to be compressing down to the ultimate level. Cracking sounds could be heard from his bones as the foundation of his heaven-shaking, earth-shattering fist strike was prepared. Within moments, Bai Xiaochun pulsed with explosive power. That power soon turned into a wild tempest that coursed through him with such power that, if his bones weren't imbued with such incredible defensive power, it would have crushed him out of existence. His skeleton was the foundation of it all. The power of his flesh and blood was madly compressed, until finally, it exploded out through his skin. This was a crucial moment, and a unique aspect to the Undying Emperor's Fist. Under normal circumstances, the power would have erupted from his skin in explosive fashion and dissipated in all directions. But instead, 99% of the locations where that power would normally have vented, were now sealed up. The only place for the power to go, was the fist formed by his right hand. All of a sudden, a black hole appeared inside of him that seemed capable of crushing everything in existence. As for his right fist, the black vortex that had formed around it emanated an aura that could shake heaven and earth, an aura that seemed impossible to constrict or restrain. It seemed so powerful that if it were to strike out, Bai Xiaochun's entire body would be hit by a backlash from the Undying Emperor's Fist, and destroyed. Behind Bai Xiaochun, a shadowy figure appeared. It was a man in imperial robes, with an imperial crown. Although his facial features were impossible to make out, there was something domineering about him, as though his imperial will were superior to all creation. Everything around Bai Xiaochun shattered and twisted. Off in the distance, Gongsun Yi, Xu Shan, the second prince, Chen Manyao, and everyone else all gasped in shock. Zhou Hong was the closest to Bai Xiaochun, and as soon as he sensed that something strange was going on, a feeling of imminent, deadly crisis rose up within him. However, before Zhou Hong could do anything, Bai Xiaochun grinned, looked at Zhou Hong and his black streaks of light, and unleashed a fist strike. The shadowy emperor behind Bai Xiaochun merged into his fist, causing it to thrum with a domineering, imperial will. Wild colors flashed in heaven and earth, and a screaming wind kicked up. It was as if an enormous giant were unleashing all of the power in its body. At the same time, a boundless gravitational force sprang up, and the black vortex grew rapidly in size until it was fully 30 meters across. As it did, it sucked in all of the color in the world, becoming the focus of all attention, as if that fist and that vortex were the only things that existed in the world. As the fist strike rocketed through the air, Zhou Hong let out a miserable shriek. Eyes filling with panic and terror, and heart pounding painfully, he sent streams of green light flowing out of himself to form a long sword. Gripping the sword tightly, he slashed it toward the incoming fist. 9 serenities slash. The mad slash of his sword shook heaven and earth. Green sword light spilled out, shredding the air, and was joined by the black streams of light, which were like a sword rain that shot toward Bai Xiaochun. The witnesses to the event were reeling in shock at the ferocious scene playing out in front of them. Never before had any of them seen a fight like this between two members of their own generation. However, it only lasted for the briefest of moments. When the green sword light contacted the black vortex of Bai Xiaochun's fist strike, a massive boom filled the area. Boom! As the deafening sound rolled out, Zhou Hong's green sword light shattered, and the black streams of light writhed as they were wiped out of existence. A torrent of blood sprayed out of Zhou Hong's mouth as virtually all the bones in his body were broken. His flesh was instantly lacerated into a mangled mass of bloody strips, and his nascent soul flew out into the open. Immediately rendered unconscious, he was sent tumbling backward like a kite with its string cut. The debut of the Undying Emperor's Fist was shocking to everyone who could observe it. Furthermore, Bai Xiaochun hadn't even used the full power of the fist strike, only about 30%. Aware of how devastating it was, he had actually been holding back for fear of killing Zhou Hong. And yet, even that 30% was completely and utterly astonishing. Just as the description of the fist strike had indicated, it could shake heaven and rock the earth. Its power vastly surpassed the throat-crushing grasp and the mountain-shaking bash. It was a domineering power that could shake one to the depths of their psyche. Everyone present felt like they were being struck by heavenly lightning, and only began to gasp after a long moment of shock. Even Gongsun Yi and the second prince were stunned, and subconsciously tried to calculate how they would have fared if struck. It only took a moment for them to come to the conclusion. That only someone far stronger than Zhou Hong would be able to stand up to that domineering Imperial will. Nobody in the necromancer kettle could possibly stand up to it. None of the chosen would ever have been able to guess that Bai Xiaochun had a technique like this at his disposal. It was a fist strike so powerful that it didn't even seem like something from the nascent soul level. Taking advantage of the fact that Zhou Hong had been knocked unconscious, Bai Xiaochun sped forward, grabbed his fleshly body and nascent soul, and then transformed into a beam of light that shot away with lightning-like speed. The shocked bystanders all prepared to start chasing him, and yet, even before they could take a single step, a haughty voice rang in their ears. "Don't provoke me, fools. I can use that same fist strike 100 more times if I want." Because of the haughty and domineering tone, everyone, without exception, stopped moving. Not a single person dared to give chase. Even Gong Sun Yi was left trembling, a very unsightly expression on his face. There he stood, panting a bit, his legs still hovering above the ground as he stared at Bai Xiaochun fleeing into the distance. As of this moment, Gong Sun Yi's pride had suffered a major blow. Then there was the termagant Xu Shan, who was equally stunned as she watched Bai Xiaochun leaving. There was a look in her eyes which was rarely seen, fervent adoration. The second prince's eyes flickered as countless conflicting emotions appeared in his heart. As for Chen Manyao, she stood next to the second prince, a mixture of suspicion and astonishment mingling deep in her eyes. After a long moment, however, people finally began to react. There's absolutely no way he can use a fist strike like that more than a few times. That's right. If he could, why would he run away? If he really is the type who seeks revenge over the smallest grievance, then why wouldn't he take advantage of how shocked we were to simply attack us? Gong Sun Yi and the other top chosen didn't say anything, but considering their level and status, they obviously saw through Bai Xiaochun's ruse. And yet, even if it was a bluff, the images of what had just occurred were burned into their minds, filling them with fear. Another moment passed. Finally, Xu Shan took a deep breath and then began to give chase. Next was the second prince, and then Chen Manyao. However, none of those three were interested in fighting Bai Xiaochun. Rather, they had other intentions. Although most of the chosen present couldn't tell that, Gong Sun Yi could. He stood there quietly for a moment, eyes bloodshot as his desire to do battle slowly grew. I cannot allow anyone to surpass me. As of this moment, Bai Hao, you have my attention. At that point his cultivation base surged with power as he headed, not after Bai Xiaochun, but toward the Ghost King Orchid. That's where you'll end up eventually, and that's where I'll be waiting, to fight you. Determination shone in Gong Sun Yi's eyes, as well as the desire to do battle. Everyone else exchanged awkward glances, and all of them regretted having provoked someone as inhuman as this. And yet, none of them could ever have predicted what had just occurred, that a person they all assumed they could easily crush would actually turn out to be a vicious and dangerous beast. Damn it, I can't believe this Bai Hao is so strong. If he had used that fist strike from the beginning, then of course we wouldn't have provoked him. Yeah, exactly. If he had shown such spectacular battle prowess early on, we would have tried to make friends with him, not attack him. There really wasn't a need to let things reach this point. Everyone was grumbling about the situation, but nobody could do a single thing about it. Instead, they banded together into 3 groups and scattered in different directions. None of them had any plans to try to kill Bai Xiaochun. Neither did any of them harbor any aspirations of getting the Ghost King fruit. All of them were thinking the same thing. It didn't matter who ended up with the Ghost King fruit, their current goal was to get out of the necromancer kettle as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, Bai Xiaochun sped along through the mists, his face ashen. Even he had been shocked to see the undying Emperor's fist in action. At the moment, his fleshly body power was severely drained, and his blood, bones, muscles, and tendons all burned with pain. Thankfully, he had only used 30% of the power of the fist strike, and had been able to rely on the power of his cultivation base to flee. Otherwise, he would have been in big trouble. The undying Emperor's fist is incredible. If I had used it at full strength, then even a diva would have been shaken. The mere thought of how things had played out left him excited. He had begun to cultivate the undying live forever technique from the moment he stepped into the cultivation world, and had spent a huge amount of resources on it throughout the years. After seeing that spectacular fist strike, he decided that it had all been worth it. Furthermore, now that he had reached the 3rd stratum of the tempered bones level, his bones constantly radiated a pleasant warmth into him. Clearly, his fleshly body's defensive capabilities were now far beyond what they had been before. In addition, he could recover from injuries much more quickly. When I made my exit earlier, everyone was clearly terrified. HMMMPHH. I guess there was no reason to be so frightened earlier on. Having reached this point in his train of thought, Bai Xiaochun realized that his ability to crush everyone else in the necromancer kettle meant that he didn't need to be nervous at all. In fact, it was with great anticipation that he pulled the unconscious Zhou Hong out of his bag of holding. After putting his nascent soul back into his fleshly body, he pulled out the eternal parasol and stabbed it into his chest. The pain caused Zhou Hong's eyes to snap open. "What do you think you're doing, Bai Hao?" he shouted angrily. However, before he could do anything else, his life force began to drain out, provoking a scream of pain. In the blink of an eye, he was withered up, his life force absorbed by Bai Xiaochun, who used it to help restore his fleshly body power. As for Zhou Hong, because of his serious injuries and the pain, he quickly passed out again. Bai Xiaochun pulled the eternal parasol back, and then glared at Zhou Hong angrily. "Useless. Not even Li Tiansheng was this weak. How can you have so little life force? Are you really an heir apparent? You look like silver, but you're really pewter." Grumbling angrily, he put Zhou Hong back into his bag of holding and then shot onward through the mists. An entire day went by, and Bai Xiaochun continued to rock the necromancer kettle. With his incredible battle prowess, his heaven-down nascent soul, and his incredible fleshly body power, he was a force to be reckoned with among the wildlander chosen. He was like a hungry wolf thrown into a flock of sheep. Well, perhaps to put it that way would be a bit of an exaggeration, but not by much. Early on, he had not been drawing on the full potential of his heaven-down nascent soul, but now he was. Other than some individuals who were already half a step out of the nascent soul stage, those powerful experts who had already gained some enlightenment of heaven and earth and were almost devas, few people could possibly be a match for him. Not even Zhou Hong, who was in the great circle of the nascent soul stage, came close. Therefore, there was no need to even mention all of the other chosen. Besides, Bai Xiaochun was actually confident that the power of his undying emperor's fist would be enough to cause a diva to back down. During the day which passed, Bai Xiaochun appeared inside of the necromancer kettle on numerous occasions. Because there were no solitary stragglers, and not even any groups with 5 people, he had no choice but to target the groups with dozens of people in them. He truly was like a starving wolf, stalking about madly. When he attacked, he would grab a few people and then flee before anyone could do anything. Because of that, no one could defend against him, and everyone was slipping into even greater depths of fear. After a day passed, he had kidnapped more than 30 chosen, which meant that more than 60% of the total group of wildlanders had fallen into his hands. As for the final group of 30 or so, they trembled with fear, especially because of the strange parasol that he used, which consumed life force. The survivors were now split into 2 groups. One group went with the second prince and Chen Manyao to regroup with Gong Sunyi near the Ghost King Orchid. The other group headed back in the direction they knew to be the mouth of the necromancer kettle, and the exit. Clearly, they were admitting defeat, and didn't want to contend with Bai Xiaochun. They wanted to get out of this place at the earliest possible moment. Other than those 2 groups, there was a single person who continued to search for Bai Xiaochun within the mists. It was none other than Princess Shushan, daughter of the Spirit Advent King. A strange light could be seen flickering in her eyes as she attempted to track Bai Xiaochun down. "I'll definitely find you eventually, Bai Hao. You're mine." Half a day before, she had run into him, and they had begun to fight. However, after only fighting for a short time, he knocked her several hundred meters away with a fist strike, then turned and fled. Shu Shan was not happy with that outcome at all. Bai Xiaochun's numerous victories over so many chosen had him feeling very, very confident in how intrepid and valiant he was. He currently had more than 70 people captive in his bag of holding, all of them sucked so dry of life force that they were little more than skin and bones. With so much life force, his tempered bones had long since passed from the 3rd stratum to the 5th. The defensive capabilities of his fleshly body were such that divine abilities belonging to the early nascent soul stage would still hurt slightly if they hit him, but wouldn't significantly injure him. "It won't be long now before I reach the 6th stratum," he thought excitedly as he sped through the mists. After searching here and there for a couple hours, he came to find that the remaining chosen had split into 2 groups. "What bullies, forcing me to work so hard." Sighing at how impressive he was, he looked in the direction of the group which had already admitted defeat. Whatever. Since they've admitted the error of their ways, Lord Bai will let them go for now. However, as for all the people who are waiting by the Ghost King Orchid, they can't blame Lord Bai for teaching them a lesson." Licking his lips, he began to fly toward the Ghost King Orchid. However, even as he took to motion, a beam of light appeared behind him in the mists. Within it was a young woman, who after catching sight of Bai Xiaochun, suddenly shouted, "Get back here, Bai Hao." As soon as he saw the shadowy figure approaching, Bai Xiaochun's self-confidence vanished. Frowning, he accelerated with all the speed he could muster, moving in the opposite direction. During his fight with Xu Shan half a day earlier, he had been put in a very bad position. It wasn't that she was particularly powerful, she actually had about the same battle prowess as Zhou Hong. However, she had a jade pendant that had been given to her by her father the Spirit Advent King, which gave her a defensive shield that Bai Xiaochun couldn't penetrate. The Nine Serenities King and the War Champion King had not given special magical items to Zhou Hong and Gong Sun Yi, their reasoning being that they didn't believe anyone in the wildlands would go so far as to try to kill their sons. Considering that Zhou Hong and Gong Sun Yi were both heirs apparent who would be kings in the future, giving them defensive treasures could actually do more harm than good. They wanted their sons to be sharpened on the grindstone of battle. But the Spirit Advent King did not think in such a way. He had given a special jade pendant to Xu Shan, a magical item whose shield could not be broken, even by a diva. Only a strike from a demigod would be able to pierce through it. Because of that, Xu Shan was completely and utterly safe. In fact, she could almost be considered to be cheating in the necromancer kettle. Not even Bai Xiaochun with his seemingly unvanquishable battle prowess would be able to hurt her. After fighting back and forth with her, he was stunned to find that he simply couldn't hurt her. Angry and a bit depressed, he had finally sent her flying away with a fist strike and then fled. And yet, she didn't seem to want to give up, and kept chasing him. The fact that she kept trying to fight him had him feeling very down, and at the same time, glad that not everyone was like her. Otherwise, the necromancer kettle would definitely not be any fun at all. Bai Xiaochun quickly put quite a distance between himself and Xu Shan, and soon disappeared into the mists. Further back, Xu Shan stopped in place and stamped her foot onto the ground angrily. "I'm going to catch you eventually, Bai Hao. You're mine, mine." In response, Bai Xiaochun picked up speed. The fact that this princess from Spirit Advent City seemed dead set on fighting him was a big headache. How can I fight this wench when she has that jade pendant? The more he thought about it, the more annoying he found her to be. And yet, there was nothing he could do about the situation. Worried that she was still following him, he zigged and zagged a bit before heading in the direction of the Ghost King Orchid. Some distance away from the valley containing the Ghost King Orchid, Gong Sun Yi sat on a low-lying hilltop, doing breathing exercises. His goal was to keep himself in top condition for the coming fight, which he was burning to get into. He was still completely and utterly confident that Bai Hao would show up soon. Not too far away were the second prince and Chen Manyao, surrounded by a dozen or so chosen from the various noble clans. All of them had very unsightly expressions on their faces because of everything that had occurred in the necromancer kettle. Nobody had even considered that something so unexpected could take place. First was the nascent divinity void restrictive spell, which caught everyone off guard, and then there was the fact that Bai Hao had turned out to be shockingly powerful. It was occasionally possible to catch sight of the group who had already given up, sitting in their location near the mouth of the enormous kettle. Many in the group near the Ghost King Orchid had also thought of giving up, but simply couldn't bring themselves to do it. Even though they knew Bai Xiaochun was incredibly strong, some of them still hoped that there was another chance left. After all, the second prince was in the great circle of the nascent soul stage, and they also had the matchless junior champion King Gong Sun Yi on their side. Plus, there was the Grand Heaven Master's apprentice Chen Manyao. With those three, they still hoped that they could defeat Bai Hao. Many thoughts passed through the minds of the waiting chosen as they calculated what there was to gain and lose by taking a stand. At the same time, they kept looking around vigilantly. As for the second prince, his eyes flickered as he contemplated a train of thought quite different from most of the others. He was intrigued by Bai Hao. After all, it seemed obvious that the giant ghost king had actually cruelly abandoned Bai Hao in the necromancer kettle. Perhaps I can win this Bai Hao over to my side. Although, considering the high level of his cultivation base, he must surely have aspirations of his own. If I want to win him over, I'll need to give him a good reason to do so. Off to the side sat Chen Manyao, her brow furrowed as she thought back to what she had seen of Bai Hao. There was definitely something about him that seemed familiar, although she still hadn't been able to come up with any concrete clues to work with. Even as everyone sat wrapped up in their thoughts, Gong Sun Yi suddenly looked up. The second prince and Chen Manyao also turned their heads, and the hearts of everyone else lurched as they looked over in the same direction. Off in the distance, the mists churned as a figure sped through them like a whizzing arrow. And that figure was heading in their direction. His hair whipped about him, and his clothes flapped in the wind. His eyes shone with bright light, and he radiated a domineering and proud air. Bai Hao, he's here. Everyone was immediately shaken. The desire to do battle exploded in Gong Sun Yi's heart, but he suppressed it for the moment. Remaining there cross-legged, he closed his eyes and went back to meditating. His aura was currently not stable enough, and he wanted to be completely calm. The time to fight has not yet come, he murmured. He wanted to wait until his battle spirit was like a raging torrent. Bai Hao, you will be the grindstone that makes me an even sharper blade than before. The atmosphere of the group by the Ghost King Orchid immediately grew very stifled upon the appearance of Bai Xiaochun. The second prince's eyes flickered, and he took a step forward, turning into a blur of afterimages as he shot toward Bai Xiaochun. That immediately got the other chosen excited, many of whom flew to join the second prince. Only Gong Sun Yi and Chen Manyao didn't move. Unlike Gong Sun Yi, Chen Manyao's eyes were shining brightly as she stared at Bai Xiaochun, imprinting his every move and action into her mind. Also paying close attention was the group of a dozen or so who were near the mouth of the necromancer kettle. Although they had already admitted defeat, it was a begrudging action at best, and they were all eager to see how things would play out. Everyone paid close attention as Bai Xiaochun and the second prince shot toward each other and then collided. The second prince drew fully upon the power of the great circle of the nascent soul stage, performing a double-handed incantation gesture that summoned 7 shadowy figures, each of them fully 300 meters tall. Each shadowy figure wore imperial robes, had an imperial crown, and radiated an ancient air. The figures seemed to lock the entire area down, creating something like a domain in which the second prince radiated the aura of an emperor. This was the first time he had summoned such an energy, which despite not being the power of a diva, was very close to it, and actually seemed to provoke a reaction from all heaven and earth. Then, rumbling could be heard as a golden dragon appeared, which shot roaring through the air toward Bai Xiaochun. Bai Xiaochun's expression flickered at the shocking sight of the second prince's divine ability. It actually seemed very similar to his own Undying Emperor's fist, although the two were clearly different on a fundamental nature. The Undying Emperor's fist drew upon the power of his own body and then blessed it with explosive might. In contrast, the second prince's technique was clearly drawing on outside power. The fact that the second prince could command a chi flow that agitated the energy of heaven and earth left Bai Xiaochun feeling as if he were witnessing something that all of the people of the Arch-Emperor in the Wildlands would bow down and offer worship to. However, what was most shocking of all was the fact that any one of the 7 shadowy figures was filled with so much power that it caused Bai Xiaochun's scalp to tingle. Unexpectedly, the second prince could clearly use only this one divine ability to counter multiple fist strikes from Bai Xiaochun. What divine ability is this? He thought, shocked. As for everyone else who was watching, they started to get very excited. That's Arch-Emperor magic. It's the Imperial clan's secret magic. It's been a long time since I've seen the Imperial clan's secret magic. The second prince definitely deserves his reputation. After the Grand Prince, he's next in line to earn the Imperial title. The rumbling sounds of the fighting which filled the air soon drowned out the noise of the chattering crowd. He's a lot stronger than Zhou Hong. Bai Xiaochun thought, his pupils constricted. With that, he extended his right hand, within which appeared the 16-fold spirit-enhanced black spear. An unsightly expression could be seen on the second prince's face as he fell back. He was actually not having as easy of a time as he was making it look. To his astonishment, he found that his cultivation base was actually being suppressed, and was difficult to rotate. Were it not for the fact that he was in the great circle of the nascent soul stage and was using the Imperial clan's secret magic, he would already have been seriously wounded by the fighting. By this point, he couldn't hold out any longer, and coughed up a mouthful of blood. Shock and terror could be seen in his eyes as he realized that Bai Xiaochun hadn't even used his trump card, that fist attack. This Bai Hao is too strong. Not even my Imperial clan secret magic is strong enough to get him under control. With that, he threw his hands into the air, causing yellow light to spill off of the 7 shadowy figures. Immediately, the entire area shone as if with gold, and then, 2 golden dragons appeared, which shot roaring toward Bai Xiaochun. The audience of Chosen watched with sparkling eyes as the battle played out. From the look of things, these 2 opponents were actually evenly matched. Eventually, some of them even flew out to join the fighting. Before long, divine abilities and magical techniques were flying here and there, causing dazzling light to shine everywhere. Even the people who had congregated near the exit were now hesitating. After exchanging glances, many of them flew out, defiantly choosing to change their mind and take advantage of the opportunity which had presented itself. Bai Xiaochun noticed what was happening immediately, and his eyes flickered with cold light. Aware that the second prince was not by any means weak, and that his 7 statues were incredibly strong, he suddenly put away his spear, ignored the incoming divine abilities, and punched his hand down toward the ground. The land quaked, and then, Bai Xiaochun softly spoke a word that was protected by the power of his mask. Water swamp, the entire area filled with water vapor, creating something like a huge swamp. However, the powers of Bai Xiaochun's mask concealed that fact, and ensured that everyone saw nothing but Bai Xiaochun, and the brutal aura which radiated off of him. That was when Bai Xiaochun quietly spoke another word. Kingdom. After speaking those words, Bai Xiaochun looked up, and an energy erupted out in all directions, sending his hair whipping about. Although no one could see it, a watery swamp now filled the entire 500-kilometer area around them. Simultaneously, numerous spikes appeared, rising up and then curling around themselves as a gigantic beast claw appeared. Heaven and earth seemed to teeter on the verge of complete collapse. The 2 golden dragons let out miserable shrieks as they slammed into the claw. To the claw, it was as if they were tiny bugs that were instantly crushed out of existence. Blood sprayed out of the mouth of the second prince as he was sent flying backward. As for the other chosen who had been charging into battle, their faces fell, and they also began to cough up blood. It was almost as if a mountain had slammed into them, sending them tumbling backward. Further off in the distance, the dozen or so chosen who had previously given up, but had changed their minds and begun flying toward the fighting, now stopped in mid-air, looks of blank shock on their faces. That was the only possible reaction. A moment before, Bai Xiaochun and the second prince had been evenly matched, but in the blink of an eye, the second prince was grievously injured, and everyone else was sent spinning off to the side. A single attack left everyone gasping in shock. Those chosen who had begun to fly over from the mouth of the kettle were left hanging in midair, jaws agape, eyelids twitching, their hearts filled with intense regret. As of this moment, they could neither advance nor retreat. They exchanged dismayed glances, and then suddenly scattered. They did not head toward the Ghost King Orchid, nor toward the mouth of the Necromancer Kettle. In their fear, they hoped to go hide alone somewhere in the world around them. It was a large place, after all, and even if Bai Xiaochun searched high and low, he couldn't find all of them. Bai Xiaochun ignored them. At the moment, his heart was pounding with excitement. This was his first time using his water swamp kingdom after breaking through to the nascent soul stage. The entire claw of the beast beneath could fit through the 500-kilometer area it could now open up, which had been shocking to behold. So strong. Not even my undying emperor's fist measures up. Swallowing hard, he contemplated how that fact must have something to do with his heaven-down nascent soul. Yet again, he sighed inwardly, convinced that everything he had done to reach the heaven-down nascent soul stage had been worth it. He also had the lingering feeling that the clawed hand he had just seen was actually not the complete hand. He was fairly certain it had only been a portion of the whole. My life essence spirit, he murmured, eyes glittering. Then he burst into motion, capturing all of the chosen who had just been injured by his water swamp kingdom, sealing them, and tossing them into his bag of holding. As for the second prince, he tried to interject and say something, but Bai Xiaochun wasn't in the mood, and quickly sealed and captured him. Having accomplished these things, Bai Xiaochun looked at the only 2 people left in the area. One was Gong Sun Yi, who sat there cross-legged, meditating. He hadn't opened his eyes the entire time, not even when Bai Xiaochun delivered the astonishing blow to all the chosen just now. There was an energy building up in Gong Sun Yi. From the look of things, when he finally did open his eyes, he would be powered up to a level that he had never yet reached in his life up to this moment. Bai Xiaochun looked at him briefly, and could tell that there was something odd going on. Then he turned to look at the second person who remained behind, who was Chen Manyao. Chen Manyao stood there, her brow furrowed as she looked back at him. Bai Xiaochun couldn't tell whether or not she recognized him, and that realization made him very nervous. However, he didn't let such feelings show on his face. Trying to look just as icy as ever, he coolly said, "You haven't attacked me this entire time. Therefore, I won't cause any problems for you. Why don't you leave?" His words were uttered with profound aloofness and pride, and after speaking them, he turned and headed toward Gong Sun Yi. Of course, secretly, he kept his eye on Chen Manyao to gauge her reaction. Gong Sun Yi's eyelids flickered. Apparently, he was taking advantage of the pressure weighing down from Bai Xiaochun to further temper his own desire to do battle. When Bai Xiaochun was only about 300 meters away from Gong Sun Yi, Chen Manyao's eyes glittered, and she unexpectedly performed an incantation gesture with her right hand. Snowflakes sprang out around her, swirling together to form a mirror made of ice, which she pointed at Bai Xiaochun. Bai Xiaochun's expression flickered, and he immediately shot backward. As he did, light from the mirror landed in the spot he had just occupied, causing cracking sounds to fill the air as it was turned into ice. At the same time, frigid qi swirled about everywhere. To Bai Xiaochun's shock, that frigid qi was stimulating the magic of his frigid domain, to the point where it seemed like it might leap out into the open beyond his control. Thankfully, a mere thought on his part sent his cultivation base rotating to suppress the frigid domain. Afterward, he turned to look at Chen Manyao, his heart filled with mixed emotions, but his eyes showing only anger. "What do you think you're doing?" he said. Ignoring him, Chen Manyao performed an incantation gesture and pointed out, causing the freezing ice to become the opposite of what it had been moments ago. Now it was a sea of flames. Instantly, the flames bore down on Bai Xiaochun as if to consume him. From what he could tell, this was all a test to see if he had the power of a frigid domain. These flames were designed to cause a cultivator to react on an instinctive level. Someone who had cultivated with frigid qi for long periods of time, but then unexpectedly encountered a fire-type power, would definitely reveal some weaknesses. Beads of sweat popped out on Bai Xiaochun's forehead. The purpose of this probing attack was obvious, and he knew that if things kept going on the way they were, then it was definitely possible that he might reveal something. There was no time to think about the matter at the moment, so he blurred into motion, appearing right in front of Chen Manyao. "Are you looking to die?" he said, a vicious expression on his face. The rumbling sounds echoed out as he unleashed a fist strike. However, instead of dodging or defending, a strange look appeared on her face, and she simply remained in place, looking Bai Xiaochun in the eye, apparently waiting for his fist to strike her. Bai Xiaochun's eyes went wide. If his strike landed on her and she didn't resist, then she would die, or at the very least, be seriously injured. Before he could even think about the situation, he aborted his fist strike. At that point, a faint smile could be seen in Chen Manyao's eyes, and Bai Xiaochun realized that he had been fooled. Chen Manyao had taken a gamble by putting herself up as bait. Very crafty, he thought, wanting to cry but finding no tears to do so. As the saying goes, it does no good to mend the pen after the sheep are lost. And yet, Bai Xiaochun continued with his attack. Although he didn't strike with a fist, he did strike her with his palm, instantly sealing her. Before she could say anything, he grabbed her and threw her into his bag of holding, averting his eyes so he couldn't see the expression on her face. What was that all about, he thought. By now, he was almost completely convinced that Chen Manyao had guessed who he was. However, he couldn't for the life of him think of how she had done it. After all, his disguise was perfect. He was of a mind to ask directly, but at the moment, didn't dare to face her, for fear of revealing more secrets. Sighing and shaking his head, he looked over at the final person remaining, Gong Sunyi. As soon as he did, Gong Sunyi's eyelids flickered even more dramatically than before. Well, isn't this amusing, Bai Xiaochun thought. He's using the pressure emanating from me as a sort of grindstone to polish his battle spirit. But what's the point? Snorting coldly, and feeling very irritated that Chen Manyao probably had figured out his secret identity, he simply charged toward Gong Sunyi. He still remembered how it was a huge sealing net thrown out by Gong Sunyi that had entrapped him early on, and ended up allowing countless chosen to hit him with divine abilities. Just thinking about that moment of crisis got Bai Xiaochun feeling irritated. When he was roughly 30 meters away, Gong Sunyi's eyes snapped open, revealing brightness like that of twin suns. At this point, his battle spirit was at its peak, and it was with explosive speed that he shot forward. "Bai Hao!" he roared, instantly summoning 100,000 magical symbols, which swirled around him, casting golden light everywhere, making it seem like he was surrounded by a golden hurricane. Rumbling sounds filled the air, and blinding light spread out in all directions. In the face of the golden light, Bai Xiaochun seemed like a dandelion that could be crushed in an instant. The magical symbols quickly turned into razor-sharp blades that slashed toward him through the air. A golden hurricane of countless blades descended onto Bai Xiaochun. However, his fleshly body defenses were already at a shocking level, and he also possessed numerous spirit-enhanced treasures. Although he wasn't a complete wild beast when it came to battle, the hurricane was still not enough to stop him. Cracking sounds rang out as the golden magical symbols slammed into him, and yet, not much happened as a result. In the blink of an eye, he was right in front of Gong Sunyi, where he clenched his hand into a fist and unleashed a fist strike. Before the strike could land, though, golden light shone in Gong Sunyi's eyes as he called all of the magical symbols back, which then transformed into a huge wall. A rumbling boom could be heard, and Bai Xiaochun was stopped in place. The golden wall trembled, and cracks spread out across its surface, but it held fast. Behind it, Gongsun Yi coughed up a huge mouthful of blood, and then took a step toward Bai Xiaochun. Is that all you've got, Bai Hao? He growled. However, inwardly, he was actually shocked. His cultivation base was under massive pressure, and although he wasn't sure exactly how this Bai Hao could be so strong, he was convinced that it was because of some strange magical technique. However, there was no time to think about the matter at the moment. Relying on his surging battle spirit to suppress the instabilities inside of him, he performed a double-handed incantation gesture and then waved his finger at Bai Xiaochun. Instantly, the golden wall collapsed back into 100,000 magical symbols, which then formed together into the shape of a golden phoenix, which shot toward Bai Xiaochun with a piercing cry. This junior champion king's divine ability is incredible. It must have been given to him by the war champion king. I don't have any nascent soul techniques, and the powerful techniques I do have take a lot of spiritual power, otherwise I could crush this junior champion king with ease. Snorting coldly, he assessed Gongsun Yi's cultivation base, which was beyond the great circle of the nascent soul stage, and was approaching the point of being half a step into the diva realm. However, that last gap was not easily bridged, and would require the right set of opportunities to do so, as well as tenacious perseverance. As the golden phoenix bore down on Bai Xiaochun, he reached out into the air and made a grasping motion, summoning his black spear with its 16-fold spirit enhancement. Not hesitating for a moment, he stabbed it toward the golden phoenix. The spear shot forth with heaven-rending, earth-crushing power, causing a string of sonic booms to echo out. Then it stabbed into the phoenix, unleashing a massive detonation. The resulting shockwave sent Gongsun Yi tumbling backward in the opposite direction. Then, Bai Xiaochun burst into motion, becoming like a black shooting star that crushed everything in its path as it headed toward Gongsun Yi. Gongsun Yi finally shuddered to a stop about 300 meters away, unable to prevent blood from spilling out of his mouth. Then he looked up at Bai Xiaochun, and the desire to do battle that existed in his eyes grew even more intense. Howling, he instantly began to charge back in Bai Xiaochun's direction. I'm the junior champion king. How could I possibly lose to you? Eyes bright red, he threw his hands out in front of him, causing the 100,000 magical symbols to form together into the shape of a golden battle axe. Grabbing it by the haft, he hurled it violently toward Bai Xiaochun. Rumbling shook the area as Bai Xiaochun destroyed the battle axe, causing the 100,000 magical symbols to collapse layer by layer. Although he was shaken, he didn't slow down at all, and continued on toward Gongsun Yi in a streak of black light. As a result of the backlash, blood gushed out of Gongsun Yi's mouth, and he was flung backward head over heels. Although a bitter chuckle escaped his throat, his desire to do battle had not been reduced in the least bit. Seemingly disregarding any fear of dying, he performed a double-handed incantation gesture to call back all of his 100,000 magical symbols. Dazzling golden light flickered as they teleported into the space in front of him, taking the form of a long golden staff. Gongsun Yi gripped the staff and then swung it with all his might, using both the power of his cultivation base and his impressive fleshly body to send something like a golden tempest toward Bai Xiaochun. This Gongsun Yi's divine ability is really remarkable, Bai Xiaochun thought, shocked. At the same time, he felt a bit envious about the 100,000 magical symbols. Obviously, though, it was a secret magic of the war champion king, something that could not be used outside of his organization. The golden staff descended upon him with mountain-toppling, sea-draining power. Abandoning his stabbing attack with his spear, he brandished it in front of him, causing the air to distort as he backed it with both cultivation base and fleshly body power. Boom! The resulting collision surpassed anything from before. A waterfall of blood erupted from Gongsun Yi's mouth, and yet he seemed mad with the desire to do battle. It didn't matter what injuries he received, he kept on fighting, and refused to retreat. This time, instead of forming a staff with his 100,000 magical symbols, he formed them into 100 separate magical items. There were sabers, spears, swords, halberds, hatchets, battle axes, hooks, tridents, and weapons of every other type. And not a single defensive item could be seen among them. Each and every one radiated an intense, murderous aura, and as Gongsun Yi waved his hand, they all shot toward Bai Xiaochun. Use your trump cards, Bai Hao. Either I die in this battle, or you die. Bai Xiaochun's expression flickered. This Gongsun Yi possessed an intense desire to do battle, and a bizarre divine ability. He didn't even seem to be afraid of dying either. All of it left Bai Xiaochun feeling very shaken. By now, he was finally starting to understand what the true chosen in the wildlands were like. Of course, all of the people he had captured so easily didn't count. But Gong Sun Yi, and even Zhou Hong, despite their flaws, could go berserk in battle and show tenacious brutality. It was something that Bai Xiaochun hadn't seen very often back in the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect. He's no match for me, but he still won't surrender. Now that I think about it, it seems like he really is using me like a grindstone to temper himself in that precarious location right between life and death. A gleam of admiration appeared in Bai Xiaochun's eyes, and he suddenly felt as if he owed some respect to this opponent. As Gong Sun Yi closed in with 100 magical items, all bursting with murderous auras, Bai Xiaochun took a deep breath and waved his hand to get rid of the black spear. His decision was to forego the use of magical items. As he stood there, cracking sounds could be heard from within him as his aura shrank down. His energy and even his soul did the same thing. Then, a black vortex appeared around his right hand, which emanated terrifying fluctuations. Simultaneously, a shadowy figure appeared, domineering to the extreme, clad in imperial robes and wearing an imperial crown on his head. Considering the look in his eyes, he clearly felt scorn for everything in heaven and earth. Want to find enlightenment in that spot between life and death? Well, I'll give you the chance. Bai Xiaochun felt particularly impressed by how awe-inspiring his words were. Clenching his right hand into a fist, he stabilized his aura and then unleashed a fist strike onto Gong Sun Yi. He didn't use full power, instead limiting it to roughly 50%. But even still, the sky faded, and the mists in the area seethed. The black vortex around his hand expanded, becoming a black hole that shot directly toward Gong Sun Yi. At the same time, the eyes of the shadowy emperor behind him distorted, causing a domineering air to erupt out as he merged into the fist and the vortex. This was Bai Xiaochun's trump card, the undying emperor's fist. Rumble. The fist strike made everything in the world seem to slow down. All eyes came to focus on it, and it became the only thing in existence. A piercing howl rang out from Gong Sun Yi, and his eyes were crimson as he watched the fist approaching, and the black hole. Then he waved both hands out in front of him. Day of the War Champion. As his voice echoed out like thunder, his 100 magical items sped up toward Bai Xiaochun's undying emperor's fist. The instant the two made contact, all of the magical items shattered and were sucked up into the black, incapable of offering any resistance. Then the black hole continued on toward Gong Sun Yi as if to swallow him up. Immediately, a sensation of imminent and deadly crisis filled him, battering his heart and mind like an enormous wave. However, in that dramatic moment between life and death, Gong Sun Yi's battle spirit did not grow weaker. Quite the opposite, it grew more intense. As it did, rumbling and cracking sounds suddenly echoed out inside of him. It was almost as if some sort of shackle within him had been broken. In that moment, a terrifying energy suddenly erupted. Countless clouds suddenly appeared up above him, which quickly formed into a face. Gong Sun Yi's face. Although it only appeared for a moment, the immense energy that came along with it indicated that he had just achieved a cultivation-based breakthrough. He was now half a step into the Diva realm. Thus, this episode comes to an end. Remember to like and comment so we can discuss the story together. Until we meet again in the next chapters.